So one thing I found in my PhD, and probably the most important finding, is that as this hoof wall, which has been generated here from the hairline, but as it moves as a mass, tubular and intertubular horn, as it moves down here, it actually compresses in a healthy, normal horse. And I showed that by studying a dozen horses initially. And this was a really exciting time for me because I don't think farriers are surprised about this, but you know, nobody in either German literature or English literature had ever mentioned this or suggested this was possible. And during my PhD, I did go to Berlin a couple of times, and I did have, because I can't read a word of German, well, I can say, eine Bier bitte. You know, it is actually the sign of a civilized person that they can order beer in at least 10 languages. So that's my sort of, so I am multilingual from ordering in time. So nobody had suggested this. And I thought about this a long time. I thought, how can I test this? Well, the simplest way is to drill 2 holes, fill them with an acrylic glue, a hoof repair glue, of a different colour. And now we can measure the descent of this one, but we can also measure the difference in distance between these 2. So this is a calibrating sticker. In other words, you need something to calibrate. If I took a picture of this building from outside, and you saw the picture, you couldn't guess the height of the building. If we stood somebody next to it who we know was 6 foot tall, we can work out how tall the building is. So you always need something that you know exactly the size of to calibrate. Now this is 12.7 millimeters, which sounds an unusual size until you know that that is actually ½ an inch. So we don't seem to have quite the same problem as you here in the States with metric, and we call them imperial measurements. You probably don't call them that, actually, inches and pounds, but even when I was at school, we were taught millimeters and all the metric stuff. When I shoe a horse, do I measure in inches or in millimeters? I measure in inches. The shoes come out too small when you make them in millimeters. That's what I so we're also split, but I found it funny that that is just a calendar sticker, you know, a wall chart. And I found it was the best thing from the point of view of size-wise. Nice blue colour, you get a good picture from it. Everything about it was right. Tested it all out for a year, did all my pilot studies. I went into the local stationers to buy a few hundred for the start of my study. I couldn't buy them, so I went to the next stations. I couldn't buy them. They stopped selling them in Europe. Now, of all the things I thought might go wrong with my PhD, I didn't think. Anyway, my wife bought them on eBay, and I still have. She bought so many thousands to make me happy that I still have them, and I don't know what to do with them. But they're the ideal size. Anyway, here's the important thing. This graph, it really shows that hoof compressions as it comes down there, and this is actually quite a strong finding. In fact, it's highly significant finding that that's what happens. So that was just the left fore of a dozen young horses, not foals actually. It was my only study that was not foals. It was horses from an age of about 300 days to 450 days. Well, that made me really excited that I could measure that. And then we tested out using a pressure mat. This is not the pressure mat, this is the protective colouring. A pressure mat would be about the size of this laptop that I'm using open now. So it's actually smaller than you can see there, but we had to protect it because it was about $30,000 worth of equipment. And my university told me that every time I had to go. And you know what, I got so fed up. In the end, I said to them, I'm really going to try and find a horse that's worth less than that. So most of these foals were worth far more than that. As you can see, you'd think this foal was trained for the job, but most of them were extremely cooperative. We used to put them on 3 times, which is the normal thing in collecting data in science, and I did it every month. And then we would get this sort of data here, and you can see it makes a pretty picture that you can see exactly what it's representing. It goes back. But you can see that we get numeric data, and that's the important thing. You can probably see from that picture the first problem was horses and foals do not walk onto a pressure mat and stand exactly at 90 degrees angle to the line. they stand like this, or they go on slightly like this, or this. So we had to find a way of actually using this data correctly. And it would have been easier if it was just in a row, because that's just an Excel readout. I used to get 59,000 lines of data every time we put the fold on. So that takes a lot of handling, but actually we only used to use about 500 lines, and that was right in the middle. And that's how we decided to do it, and that's when the poles were the most stable and it seemed to make sense. Okay, so I've set this angle, and I'm not going to go into the details of how I can find out the orientation, but the frog gives you a bit of a clue. But you can see the difference in loading just from the colour. So there's areas of the hoof, these 4 quarters, which are loaded differently. You can see this probably has the least loading, and this probably has the most. But the interesting thing is, look, this is 21 newtons here, and so it's 40 times more loading than an area right next to it. So if it showed nothing else, it shows how loading varies across the hoop. And you probably saw from Mark's presentation yesterday that he used a tech scan, and that's a slightly, it's a pressure mat as well, but there's only 2 sort of companies that do it. This is an RS scan, but it gives you the same data numerically, and once you've got numeric data, you can test the loading. So that was my study, and I wasn't here to show you my study, but I wanted you to understand how we were able to work out that was that the hoof compressed, but we were also able to show that it compressed most where there was more loading, and it grew less where there was most compression. So we could show that quite conclusively and strongly. So that, of course, has affected the way I think about the hoof, and that will lead into a lot of the thoughts during this lecture and the one tomorrow. So there are a number of material properties of horn. One is that there's continual regeneration. So there's a trigger that goes off the moment the foal is born, and the hoof starts to grow. That in itself I find quite strange and a little bit weird, but that's what happens. The foal is born, it starts growing. It doesn't stop until the horse dies. Now it does slow down throughout life probably. It's really very fast during early life, but it slows down. Okay, what does heterogeneous mean? It means it's the opposite of homogeneous, which is where material is the same all the way through. We can see from this slide that this is heterogeneous. We can see this is not the same in this direction. In fact, it's not actually the same going around the hoof, but we can see quite clearly here that these horn tubules both change size and they change shape. So the hoof wall is not the same across its surface. It is not some simple material. And it's anisotropic. Now I've actually underlined isotropic because before we learn the opposite, we need to learn the positive. And isotropic is a material that acts in the same way in all directions. So we understand that as farriers and maybe as blacksmiths, that if we take a cube of iron, we don't have to decide which way we're going to draw it out. It will act the same whichever way. So if we hammer it, whichever dimension or direction we need to do that, it will move in that way. So iron is isotropic. It has the same qualities in different directions. Hoof is anisotropic. In other words, it bends differently in different ways and it compresses differently in different directions. So again, it's quite a complex material. It's viscoelastic. Okay, that's a combination of elastic. So we know that even if we have a hoof clipping on the ground, we bend it and it recoils back into shape. Of course, there's some argument that is the hoof more flexible than elastic, but it certainly has a recoil. So it recoils under load and it recoils in movement. It also has plastic qualities. Now, plastic quality is the same as when, for example, my apprentice reversed my van into a brick wall. It put a dent in the van and it didn't spring out. If it sprung out, that would have been an elastic response, but it stayed where it was, so that is a plastic response. So in other words, if I had a tennis ball here and I squeezed it, you would know that as I let go, it would return to shape. That's an elastic response. If I had a ball with Play-Doh and I squeezed it, it would stay where it was squashed. But hoof is unusual, and it's not unique. There's lots of materials that have this property. It's viscoelastic, and that means it shares both those properties. So that means that we know that the hoof can recoil, but it also, over time, can be changed in shape, both bending and compression. So that's a combination of what I was just talking about, that compression, but also by bending over a period of time. And it's resistant to wear, and we need to remember that. That's just about its main purpose. Hoof resists wear really well. When you see how far feral horses can walk on rough terrain, it's extremely good at that job, providing it's healthy and in the right environment. Extremely good at that. And it's durable. What does that mean? Well, it basically means that the hoof germinated up here and becoming keratinized hoof by this point, grows down that hoof, and in 11 months on average it takes for a hoof to grow from top to bottom at the toe. But when it gets down here, it's pretty much as strong as it was. There's not a lot of material fatigue. We can see it in some horses where we can see very fine cracks down towards the bearing surface. But by and large, that hoof is as strong after 11 months. And we imagine that that hoof does flex and move each time the horse takes a step. How many steps does it take in a day? How many steps does it take in 11 months? So that, again, is an extraordinary thing. That hoof takes that amount of flexion. And of course, hoof horn has been studied in the modern day by the plastics industry and the laminates industry to try and work out how it gets such incredible material properties. So it is a remarkable material. All right, let's see when the hoof starts to grow. Here we have a 23-day-old embryo, and we can see that there is no hoof on the one front or one of two front limbs that have developed. Nevertheless, by 2 months of age, this is a horse, and at this point as embryo, you don't know that this is a horse. It could be a cat, dog, or human. We all look the same as an embryo, early embryo. When we become a fetus, then we can tell the difference usually. So how do I know it's a horse? Does it have a horse's head? Well, it looks pretty much like it has a lizard's head, doesn't it? But here's the thing that makes the horse unique. In the horse, I mean the horse family, so the three species of donkeys, the three species of zebras, sorry, and the donkey. The thing that makes it unique is it has a single toe on each leg, a single digit, a single toe on each leg. And again, that's quite a remarkable thing. It's probably what has led our horse to this incredible athletic ability. The horse and us share something in common. We are the two fastest animals over 20 miles. Now, I often look at myself in the mirror these days and I think, yeah, you could run alongside a horse for 20 miles. Okay. I think we're talking about top athletes and normal horses. But the horse is different that over a short period, it is in the top 10 mammals for speed. It's not the fastest, but it's in the top 10. So it does something that's absolutely incredible in the animal world. It's very fast over a long distance, and it's very fast over a short distance. Very few animals have that ability, and none at the level the horse does. And part of the reason for that is this remarkable organ, this single digit, which allows it to transfer energy very, very efficiently to the ground and propel itself along. Here at 3 months of age, we can see bone formation, and we can actually see in the hooves just about make out that there is the distal phalanx start to appear. And here we have a picture of a quite favourite horse of mine. This is the mother here won the Breeders' Cup twice, and the second once, and I think that's still the best record. So a lot was hoped for this foal when it was born. But the important thing to me from this picture is this is 30 minutes old, this foal, and it stood up, and it's feeding off its mother. It stood on those hooves. That tells us that after 11 months of development, the hooves are ready to go. Now, I am told that human babies lay on their backs for 8 months, screaming. And I've got 4 children, but I made sure I never witnessed that. That's probably why I get on with my children. I would recommend that to everybody, or in a sexist way, every man in the room. Get introduced to your children in their teenage years. I know that's okay. So that's the difference. This foal stood up, it's ready to go. And as we know from studies of feral horses, it can go an awful long way in the first days of its life. 11 kilometres, 15 kilometres, which if I translate is 7 or 8 miles to 10 miles. That's a long way. And it can do that. And it can do it because it has to follow its herd. And large herbivores have to do that to escape predators. And the hoof is a big part of that. All right. So we can see the day the foal was born because this foal decided to change the colour of its hoofs. And that occasionally happens. It was born, this is the fetal hoof, so in other words, developed in the uterus, and it's a light colour. On the day it's born, and it starts to produce that newborn, it turned dark. It is an area of weakness, and when we have a foal with a flexural deformity, we can see this actually quite radical change in angle of the hoof wall. But of course it grows out in about 145 days, and then the hoof is totally hoof that has been developed since birth. Hoof angle changes. In a normal, healthy hoof, in a normal, healthy foal, the hoof angle changes quite a lot. So we need to recognise that, because I have to tell you that 2 veterinary textbooks will tell you that a clubfoot is 60 degrees or more. My foals, and this was my data, that is, on average, my foals, and it was quite a large group, were 59.5 degrees. That sounds remarkably close to 60 degrees, and that meant that almost half of them were over that 60 degree limit. Did almost half of them have a clubfoot? No, of course they didn't. So if you think that a thoroughbred is quite correctly renowned for having a shallow hoof angle, what the angle of other breeds would be at this age, at 3 months of age?
Excuse me.
They're pretty high.
Was there any hoof care done to those?
I would hope so. I would hope so, because it goes to 2 years old.
What? I just wondered what.
No, these are all professional stud farms. Yeah. This is my data, and it was trimmed by my humble self, all of them, that I collected data. These 3 dots is a study done by Anderson and McElraith, who I think are American researchers, but I think it was done in France on thoroughbreds. But I was able to put it together, and you get this beautiful curve, which I'm sure you get for all breeds. The thing that struck me was my data from here at about 3 months to here at about 8 months. They dropped 5.5 degrees in angle. 1 degree a month, down they came. So I'm talking about hoof shape change. Nothing is going to be as dramatic as that. And I'm sure all breeds do that. So that's something that has been recognised, and that helps clinically, because people working on stud farms or young foals do not need to look at a 3-month-old foal and think it's got a club foot. But actually it's just got normal, healthy, steep hoof, which will descend. Hoof shape also changes quite a lot when they're young. This is a diagrammatic representation of our hoof, and it has been described as a truncated oblique cone. So truncated means it's been cut in this direction and this direction. We can see it's a cone, and oblique just means that it leans back. So that's a geometric description of the hoof, or the hoof capsule. And even that's not exactly correct. So the reason that description has come up, because there's been attempts to generate computer, so virtual hooves to test. I don't think it'll ever be done. I think it's far too complex, as I've shown you. And it's not truly a cone, because in a healthy horse, these heels actually come in a little bit more. And you'd know that, because if it was a pure cone, each hoof print would be a pure oval, albeit with a gap at the back. And it's not. So it's not even truly a cone. But so hooves, I think, when the foal is born, are born with a cylinder. So they're born with a cylindrical shape. All right, albeit truncated and leaning back. And then, at about 3 months, they become an inverted cone. And Bidwell and Bowker mentioned this. They beat me to it by about 3 or 4 years, but it's nice to have people that recognise this. The only difference is they said foals have inverted cones as hoofs. And I think they didn't go back as far as me. I can tell you when they're born, they're a cylindrical shape. But this occasionally causes owners a problem because they see this and they think, why does my foal's hooves look so pinched? And of course, in sometimes it is more marked than others. The other thing that's changing is, of course, the distal phalanx within the hoof capsule. So this is 1 month before birth, at birth, and 4 months after. Quite a change in both size, and I've calibrated them the same, and also in shape. So this is far closer to our mature horse, but if you look, there are no wings to this distal phalanx. So the wings of the pedal bone actually develop longer and longer throughout birth. You might think these are the wings, but that's actually because all the cartilage here in boiling these bones out disappeared. So I think the foal is born with a cylinder, it becomes an inverted cone, and then it becomes the shape we see. So I've got a little video here, and it was given to me by Chris Pollock because he knew that my studies were on this subject. And he had a student called Tracy Soward who made this video, and she took a picture of a foal every week for the first year of its life and turned it into a time-lapse video. The reason for these red arrows is this is the width at the start and this is the height at the start. So that's just to give you a reference so that you see it at the end. You're going to see a lot of things. You're going to see this shape, cylinder, you're going to see it open out, and then finally you're going to see this. You're going to see that hoof growth line coming down. You're going to see pigmentation coming to the hoof that wasn't there when the foal was born. You're going to see that it's an Australian video because every now and again a fly makes an appearance. And you're going to see an injury to the coronary band which will grow down and out and cause a crack. So there's a lot to see in 31 seconds of the first year of the foal's life. Here we go. So that was your first fly. You can see that hoof growth line from birth, and you can see the pigment coming in the hoof. You can see that it's actually become an inverted cone, and now it's already starting to become back to a cylinder again. And once that first hoof renewal grows out, it starts to become the hoof shape we recognise, and you can see that injury growing down. So we get a remarkable change in shape in a healthy normal foal. So that, I'm going to take some questions at the end. I keep looking at my watch and I'm like already running out of time. I'm about 10% of the way through this. So I actually call that hoof porn for farriers. Sometimes I just can't help locking myself in a room and watching them. All right, well, we're seeing that. I'm going to try and move on. Okay, hooves distort rapidly due to conformation. This is a foal with an algal deformity from the fetlock. So in other words, it's genuinely angled out from the fetlock. This is not an outward rotation. It's 2 months of age, and you can see that angulation there. But look how this hoof is already distorted. So most of you guys would not deal with foals, you deal with mature horses. What chance do you have when these foals already have a distorted hoof like this? So it's one of my jobs is to work on them and try and get them to maturity and improve this hoof shape, or at least keep it on track. The other thing I should have said is that all foals are born with perfectly formed, paired, symmetrical hooves. So, how many of us shoe a horse that has a perfect pair of front feet